Reverend Sherry McCreary is our speaker this morning. Yes! Woo! She is an inspirational speaker. She's a spiritual life coach. She's a forgiveness coach. Many of you took her forgiveness class that she just offered. Teacher. She's a workshop facilitator with more than 35 years experience in religious science and the New Thought arena. She began her religious science and other New Thought studies in Cleveland, Ohio. Shout out for Cleveland, yes. In the early 1970s, and later became a religious science practitioner at the Agape Center under the tutelage of Michael Bernard Beckwith in the early 1990s. She has been a minister for almost 20 years, having been ordained in both the spiritualist and interfaith traditions. So, Reverend Sherry, come on up here. We want to welcome you. So we always like to bless our speakers. So would you please energize those hands, hold them out to Reverend Sherry. She's ready to receive. So would you please repeat after me? Reverend Sherry, we open our hearts and we open our minds to receive your wisdom. We bless you and the good you bring to this congregation and to this world. We thank you for being you. And we welcome you to CLF.
Wow. Thank you. I accept the blessing. I appreciate the blessing. And I invite all of you to breathe with me, please. Those of you who've taken classes from me know that I'm the breath police. And so I will be inviting you to breathe throughout the time that we're here today. Let's take another deep breath together, please. And another deep breath. You know, back in June, I celebrated my 20th year anniversary of being a minister. And throughout those 20 years, whenever I've spoken any place, I always use a handheld mic like this, my favorite, my comfort zone, except for maybe twice before, one time back in California and one time here in Phoenix. So last night I started getting a little bit anxious because I thought that I was going to have to wear the other mic. And I was thinking, I don't like that mic. I want to use the handheld. This is where I'm comfortable. This is what I want to do. And I was getting more and more anxious about it. And when I woke up this morning, I was thinking, I know I'm going to have to use that other mic. And I really like using a handheld, and I really like to have something to do with my hands. And as I'm driving here, I started to get anxious about it again. And I just heard this little voice saying, the topic today is allow yourself to allow. And I said, yeah, but that's what I'm going to talk about. That's not what I want to do. So I took a deep breath as I listened again to that voice saying, allow yourself to allow. And so I did. As I was driving here, I was just breathing and saying, you know what? I'm just being into that place of allowing. I'm learning to practice what I preach, practice what I teach. That's not always easy. It's easier to say it than to do it. And so as I got here and I was in that place of allowing, and I walked in for the sound check, and I was waiting for him to hook that thing up to me and put it around my ear and all that, and he handed me a handheld. And you know what? I really thought about what Reverend Michelle has been talking about all month, and that is the wisdom of in the lessons and traditions we have in summer. And in summertime, that is a time of allowing, because we slow down, we start to let go, we move a bit slower, and we take things easier. And so when we move into that place of allowing, there's wisdom that comes with that, and there are lessons that come with that. And with allowing also comes willingness. And so once I moved into that place of allowing about this microphone, it sent a message to the universe that I was willing to use that other microphone. You know, God works on our willingness. And so when I opened myself up with willingness to use the other microphone, I got the one I wanted. That's how it works. It sounds so simple. It isn't very easy, but it is really simple. God works on our willingness, and our willingness comes through our allowing. And so when we think about summer and the traditions of summer, and as I said, the slowing down and the letting go, and the moving slower, and the just being in those hot, what they call lazy days of summer. And here in Phoenix, they really have to be lazy days, as hot as it is here. And I try not to use that word too often because I lived for many years in Cleveland, Ohio. Yeah. And I used to say to people all the time, why on earth would you live in Cleveland and complain about it being cold in the winter? And so when I moved to Phoenix, I had to turn that around and say, why on earth would you complain about it being hot if you live in Phoenix? So because that doesn't do anything but then make you miserable. And I thought about it when Reverend Sally was doing the reading about suffering. And I know that suffering is optional. Suffering is really optional. Think about it. Suffering is optional. Things happen. It's our response to them that makes us suffer. It's the way we respond, whether or not we're going to respond or whether we're going to react, that makes the suffering happen. And so when we start to complain about and talk about how hot it is here, it makes it worse. And that's all we can think about. And then all kinds of things start to happen because that's the vibration at which we are operating. And we start to just attract more and more things that make us think about the heat and all that. So I didn't plan to get into a whole dialogue discussion about the heat, but it came up when I started to think about the hot days of summer and it being a lazy time, a time for slowing down, a time for opening up, a time for allowing. And so that's a part of the wisdom of the summer tradition is when we move into that place of allowing. We're moving into that place of opening up. We're moving into that place of letting go. Because allowing means to give permission to give someone permission to do something or not do something, to give yourself permission to do something or not do something, to let go of something that you're holding on to release, to open up. That's what allowing is all about. And so today I'm inviting you to allow yourself to allow. Because sometimes we have to give ourselves permission to allow. Sometimes we have to give ourselves permission not to struggle. Sometimes we have to give ourselves permission not to suffer. Sometimes we have to give ourselves permission not to worry. Sometimes we have to give ourselves permission to just be, to just allow, to just let God be God. Ernest Holmes says that God is always God no matter what our emotional storm or what our objective situation may be. God is always God. God is always God. And when we can remember that, take a deep breath, step back from whatever the issue may be, step back from whatever the problem may be, step back from whatever our concern may be, step back from whatever it is we're holding on to, and say, God is always God, no matter what I'm going through now, no matter what my emotional storm, no matter what my objective situation may be, God is always God. Take a breath on that one. God is always God. God is always God. My mother used to have a saying that reminds me of, she used to always say, God has the last word on that. Whatever it was, she said, God has the last word on that. I don't care what that doctor says. I don't care what that doctor says. God has the last word on that. I remember when I was a teenager, she fell and broke her ankle, and the doctor said she'd never walk without a limp. And she said, God has the last word on that. God has the last word. And I remember her walking around the house, counting. We'd be asleep. She'd wake us up as she walked and counted. And she was counting so she wouldn't limp. She was counting 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And she did that for months. And she never had a limp because she believed that God had the last word on that. She was allowing God to be God. She was allowing God to take over. So there's wisdom in allowing, there's healing in allowing. And I sincerely believe that there is nothing that ever needs to be healed except our sense of separation from God. The only thing that ever needs to be healed is our sense of separation. It is our sense of separation. Not that we can be separate in any way from God, because we are made in God's image and in God's likeness and out of God itself. So we can't be separate, but we can think we're separate. And when we think we're separate, when we believe we're separate, we start to act like we're separate. We start to do things like we're separate. We start to treat ourselves like we're separate. We start to treat each other like we're separate. And so we live in this place of separation, not because it's the truth, but it's because that's what we believe. And so it becomes true for us. And so the thing for us to do is to move into that place of allowing so that we can deepen our relationship, deepen our connection with Spirit, and deepen in that place of oneness. Deepen in that place of oneness. Deepen in that place of oneness by bringing our attention and our focus back to our center. Bringing our attention and our focus back to our center. If you will breathe with me, it would help a lot. Let's take a breath. Ernest Holmes says, know that there is an intelligence to which we may come for inspiration, for guidance, for direction. A power that responds to us, a presence pressing against us, an animation flowing through us, a light within us. Know that there is an intelligence to which we may come. Notice he didn't say to which we may go, because that would connote separation. He said there is an intelligence to which we may come. We may come to that intelligence for inspiration, for guidance, for direction. There's a power that responds to us. There's a presence pressing against us, an animation flowing through us, a light within us. We choose to call it God, but by whatever name, it is the source of our being. And when we know that this intelligence is within us and we are setting our intention to unite with that, to be at one with that, then we're beginning to live the second step of treatment, unification. The most powerful step in the spiritual mind treatment is step 2, unification. And when I was taught spiritual mind treatment by Michael Beckwith, I had been in religious science years before I went to Agape, but I never learned treatment the way I did from him. Because he always said, if you don't get to that second step, move into that second step, and really unite and unify with Spirit, you can't move to the next step. Because everything depends on that first step, that second step. Everything depends on your being unified. Everything depends on unification. Everything depends on oneness. Because when you are one with God, when you are aligned with God, then that's when God can work in and through and as us, because we're in a place of unification. And so when we know that there's an intelligence within us, and we unite with that intelligence within us, then we can move on to doing the things that we want to do in our lives. Then we can open up to becoming all that we were created to be. And so this is what allowing is all about. Allowing is taking a deep breath and just allowing the free flow of Spirit in our lives as our lives. And so when we do that, there are three things I want to talk about. Setting your intention. Setting your intention to allow. Setting your intention to allow yourself to allow. Intention is the most important thing, because intention is the engine behind everything. Intention drives behavior. Intention opens the door to willingness. If we don't have the intention, we can't have the willingness. So we got to have our intention set first. Intention to allow. Setting our intention to let go of stuff that we hold on to. Setting our intention to let go of worry. Setting our intention to let go of trying to do it ourselves or make things happen. Setting our intention to let go of concerns about finances or relationships or health or children or whatever the case may be, ourselves, setting our intention to let go of all that stuff that we hold on to. When we set our intention, then we can then walk the path according to our intention. Of course, another thing my mom used to say is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. She used to tell us that a lot, particularly me, because I always had an intention to do something that I didn't do. That doesn't change always. But still working on that one. But I think that the reason that the road to hell, if it is paved with good intentions, is because we don't pay attention to our intention. When you set your intention, you have got to put your attention on your intention. Right? You got to put your attention on your intention. Otherwise, you go all up and down the path. If my intention is to go over into the social hall there, and I start down this path, and then I stop over here and talk, and I look over there and talk, and it could take me all day to get out of this sanctuary. Right? That's the way I go to Trader Joe's. I can do pretty well in fries now. But when I go to Trader Joe's, I can set my intention. I'm going to walk in there. I'm going to walk back to the back, get one salad, walk back out, get in my car, and go home. So I'm not going to take a bag in. I'm not going to take a cart. Sometimes it's embarrassing when I see some of the people who work there come behind me with a cart because I'm walking along, holding on to everything. And I say, but I just came in here to get one thing. They say, I know. I know, but why don't you take this cart? Because you see, my attention was not on my intention to go in and get one item, two at the most, and come out. Energy flows where attention goes. Energy flows where attention goes. Energy flows where attention goes. So the minute I walk in that door and my attention goes over, wow, look at these flowers. Oh, look at these. They have some new scones. They have some new whatever. Then the energy goes there because that's where my attention is. When my intention was to go get one thing and come out of that store, the minute I lost sight of that, then, I was all over the place. So that's why it's so important. I say that jokingly, half jokingly, because it's really true, the way that I do things sometimes. But for all of us, we do that. It could be something much more serious. We can set our intention to let go and let God. And then some health challenge comes up. And then we start to worry. Then we get scared. Then we start to be concerned. Then we start to what ifs and all that other stuff that we get caught up in. That's just a normal thing we do as human beings. And we can also stop, take a deep breath, and say that I know that God is always God. I know that God is God in this situation. I know that God is always God no matter what's happening with me. So I'm just going to take a breath, and I'm going to allow God to be God right here, right now. And that's what we do. That's what we do. And so that's how we move into that place of oneness, when we take that breath and just allow God to be God. We set our intention. We pay attention to our intention. And then the next thing we do is to practice daily. Practice allowing daily. On a daily basis, all day. That requires us to be mindful. It requires us to pay attention to what we're thinking. It requires us to pay attention to what we're saying. It requires us to pay attention to what we're doing. It requires us to pay attention to how we're living our lives. The best way to do that is with our spiritual practice. With our spiritual practice, with our prayer, with our meditation. And I think that forgiveness is a really important part of our regular spiritual practice. Daily spiritual practice, daily prayer, daily meditation, daily forgiveness, daily practicing the presence of God, like Brother Lawrence used to do, the lay brother at the Franciscan monastery in the 18th century. He practiced the presence of God by doing everything that he did for God. His menial task, whatever it was he was doing, he did it for God. Everything, washing the dishes, he washed those dishes for God. Chopping wood, driving the wagon, or whatever it was he was doing, he always did those things for God. And that was always first and foremost in his mind. That's how we practice the presence of God. We also practice the presence and court the presence of God through our regular spiritual practice. Let's take a breath. I can tell when you are not breathing because I can't. Yeah, let's take another breath. Prayer, meditation. Marianne Williamson says that if we meditate sometimes but not all times, then we tend to think that God works sometimes but not all of the time. If we pray and meditate some days but not all days, then we think that we feel the peace of God some days but not all days. If we go to God only when there's something wrong, we get the sense that God is inconsistent, when really the inconsistency lies within us. The more time we spend with God, the stronger becomes our spiritual musculature and our ability to deal with life's challenges. And so when we pray and meditate every day, we feel the presence of God in our lives every day. And that's what we want, to be open and receptive and allowing that presence of God in our lives every day. And I invite you to, and encourage you to include forgiveness in that. Include forgiveness in that. Every day releasing the things that we're holding on to, the judgment, the blame, the guilt, the shame, the anger, the resentment, the grudges, whatever it is, the regrets, all the stuff that we hold on to. Let that go. Let that go. A young woman once said to the great Sufi master, Hafiz, she asked him, what is the sign of someone who knows God? Hafiz, what is the sign of someone who knows God? And he paused for a moment and he looked at her very quietly. And he said, one who knows God has dropped the knife. One who knows God has dropped the knife that they hold against their tender self and others. Each of us has a knife that we hold against ourselves and others. Sometimes it's the knife of shame. Sometimes that knife is called judgment. Sometimes that knife is called blame. Sometimes it's called guilt. Sometimes it's called anger. Whatever the case may be, it's still a knife, but when we're willing to drop it, when we're willing to let it go, then we create a space for God to rush in. We create a space for God to rush in and work its magic in our lives, as our life. And when there's a space, God rushes in. God fills spaces. Nature abhors a vacuum, so it rushes in to fill it. God will come into those open spaces, and when we have those open spaces and those open hearts, that's a place for God to work. And so that's what we do when we move into that place of allowing. We create a space for God to work. And when we create that space for God to work, wow, look out. Look out. When we let go, when we drop that knife and create a space for God to work, then we can start to experience the gifts of the Spirit. All of the qualities of God are present within each of us. And they're always seeking to emerge. They're always seeking to express themselves. They're always seeking to reveal themselves in some way. There's a poem by Hafiz called So Many Gifts. So many gifts. There are so many gifts left unopened from your birthday. There are so many handcrafted presents sent to you by God. There are so many gifts left unopened from your birthday. The beloved is always, always willing to repeat over and over, all that I have is also yours. Oh, there are so many gifts left unopened from your birthday. Think about it in your own life. What gift is seeking to emerge, but it's blocked because we're holding on to something? What gift is seeking expression in your life? Is it joy? Is it laughter? Is it fun? Is it peace? Is it harmony? Is it balance? Is it forgiveness? Is it compassion? Is it love? Is it? What gift is seeking expression in your life today? What gift is just waiting for you to let go of something so it can just come on through? What gift is waiting for you to drop the knife? So I invite you, as you go through this week, just pay attention, be mindful. Be mindful of the knife that you're holding on to. Be mindful so that you can just it's just that simple. Open your hand, drop it. Open your hand, drop it. Remember those old westerns where the cowboy would come up behind the other person and say, drop it, and then they'd drop the gun? So drop it. Hear that voice within you saying, drop it. And then drop it. When you're having those thoughts, when you're blaming yourself, when you're shaming yourself, when you're judging yourself, when you're regretting, when you're blaming somebody else, just say to yourself, drop it. And then see yourself do that. Drop it. Let it go. Take a breath. Step back. Allow the power and the presence of God to come right on through, easily and effortlessly. One little story I want to tell you before I end. One of my favorite news stories, there's a school in Baltimore, the elementary school, where the children, in very, very bad neighborhoods, but the children come in the mornings and they have to go into this, I think they call it the yoga room. They go there in the mornings and they have 15 minutes meditation and quiet time before school starts. These are children who live in very high crime areas and see all kinds of things in their neighborhoods, but when they come to school, their mornings start with this meditation time, this quiet time. And then after that, they go to their classes and go about their day. But the really, really, really neat thing is when something comes up, some disagreement comes up between the children, instead of being sent to the principal's office, they're sent to the meditation room. And they have to sit there until they work it out. They have to go into that room where the consciousness of allowing, that consciousness of cooperation, that consciousness of healing has already been established. And so they go there until it's worked out between them. The principal said that since that program had started there, she had had 0 detentions and suspensions because the children can go into that meditation room and work that out. If we could just get Congress to do that. Just saying. If we could get anybody to do that, if we can get adults to do that, if we could get families to do that, if we could get us to do that, before we start beating up on ourselves, go to our quiet spot. Go to our meditation chair. Go to your prayer chair. Go to whatever it is you call it. Take a deep breath and move into that place of allowing, because you're moving into that place of oneness. And when you move into that place and you're willing to drop the knife, to let it all go, to allow the gifts of the Spirit to come through, then that's when we really, 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 really get a chance to experience the allness and the fullness of God in our lives. I want that for each of us so much. God bless you. Thank you. Let's just take a deep breath together as we move into prayer now. Just moving into that place where we just know and sense and feel the presence of God right here, right now, right where we are. Just knowing that there's but one power, there's but one presence, there's but one mind, there's but one life, there's but one breath. I choose to call it God, but by any other name, it is the source of our being. We can call it higher power. We can call it divine intelligence. We can call it Buddhic mind. We can call it Atman presence. We can call it Allah. We can call it whatever. Or we don't have to call it anything. we can just know that that divine intelligence, that isness that is God, that onlyness that is God, that oneness that is God, is my very life. It is the life of each of us here this day. And so it's from this place of awareness of this oneness and this allness and this fullness of God that I speak this word for each of us this day. Just speaking a word of allowing. And as we allow, we get a chance to experience the wholeness of God, the fullness of God, the allness of God, and we welcome it into our lives and into our experience right here and right now. Knowing that this is where healing happens. This is where healing happens. As we release and let go and drop the knife and let go of the judgment and the anger and the blame and the shame and all that stuff, and we create a space for that healing presence of God to move in and through and as our lives. Oh, how grateful I am to have the opportunity to speak this word for each of us this day. Knowing that healing is happening for each of us in this moment, this day. I speak a special word of blessing for Reverend Michelle and Reverend Lonnie as they're on their vacation, just knowing that right where they are, God is blessing and keeping them, surrounding them with safety and protection as they travel. This word goes out to anyone on this planet needing a prayer this day, knowing that God is in the midst of every situation and circumstance. And I pause momentarily so that you may speak the names of anyone you'd like held in prayer this day. You may speak their names silently or aloud, but you may speak them now. And so for all those whose names were spoken here this day, I'm just knowing that right where they are, God is, and that healing is happening even though they may not see it. But we know that God is in the midst of everything. And so I just say thank you, Father, Mother, God. Thank you, infinite presence. Thank you, Divine Mother. I just allow it to be now. And we say together, and so it is. Amen.